Tonight, the first head-to-head matchup in the 2024 race for the White House. President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump are an hour away. Tonight, the first head-to-head matchup in the 2024 race for the White House. President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump are an hour away from facing off again on a debate stage. 4 years ago, their first debate was a night of interruptions, name-calling, and sometimes chaos. This time, what are local voters listening for to help them make their choice? Our round table of political experts is here to help you understand what's at stake with 131 days until Election Day. From Channel 4, the local station, this is a Vote 2024 special CNN presidential debate.
All right, we want to give you some live images from the Camish Pavilion in Atlanta. That is where tonight's presidential debate is going to be held an hour from now between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. We appreciate you joining us. Tonight's CNN presidential debate, the first of two debates scheduled ahead of the November election. This is also the very first time that Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump will be face-to-face since the 2020 presidential cycle.
The candidates will be answering those important questions that we know all of you, the voters, want answers. And we are here to discuss what you can expect tonight and what this debate means for the election. The CNN presidential debate begins at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. For the first time in recent history, this debate will have 2 commercial breaks. It'll also be hosted by CNN's Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. You'll be able to watch the debate simulcast with CNN right here on Channel 4. And we want to introduce you to our panel that is a political analyst. So excited about this. Always enjoy when we get to do this together. And you're going to hear from them as we get closer to the debate. But News4JAX political analyst Rick Mullaney, who spent 20 years serving as legal counsel and advisor to 3 Jacksonville mayors. Chris Hand is with us as well, Chief of Staff for Mayor Alvin Brown, also a key staff member to former U.S. Senator and former Governor Bob Graham. And then Dr. John Allen Newman is with us, a local pastor, political strategist, more than 40 years. All of you so important in our community, and I love the experience that you're going to be able to bring tonight and share with us. They're like our live cheat sheets. That's a great way to put it, yes. It's wonderful. We also want to introduce to you 2 students from the University of North Florida. They'll be joining us a little bit later in the show. Bethly Luktama is a senior at UNF, double majoring in political science and English. And Amelia Shepard, also a senior, double majoring in political science and philosophy. And our coverage also continues with Washington correspondent Julia Benbrook and News4JAX reporters Ashley Harding and Khalil Maycock, who are out at local debate watch parties tonight. Let's first go to Julia, who joins us live from outside the debate venue in Atlanta. Julia?
Well, we're just about an hour from this historic showdown. It'll be the first time that President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump have been on the debate stage since their 2 clashes back in 2020. That's when Trump's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic was really front and center. There are now new issues that are driving the race to the White House, and both of these candidates have records to defend.
I want to make sure.
Mr. President, can you let him finish, sir?
During the first presidential debate of 2020,
the question is,
Donald Trump interrupted Joe Biden more than 100 times.
Everybody remembers the disastrous first debate where he sort of lost the campaign that night. But the second debate, he was good. He was measured. He had command of the facts.
When it comes to tonight's debate, sources familiar with the conversation say Trump's advisors and allies have tried to steer him away from airing his grievances and have instead encouraged him to focus in on kitchen table issues like the economy, crime, and inflation. All areas where Biden will have to defend his record. But Trump has also added to his record since these 2 last met on the debate stage.
Roe v. Wade comes down. January 6th happens. You have 88 felony indictments. You've got the criminal felony charges.
Biden's team is looking to paint Trump as unhinged and unfit to return to the Oval Office. They're also hoping the president can highlight the domestic issues that have become centerpieces of his campaign.
There's a huge amount of opportunity for Joe Biden on debate night to really drive at Trump's vulnerabilities on abortion, on democracy.
The latest CNN poll of polls shows no clear leader right now. Nationwide, the current average stands at 47% supporting Biden and 49% supporting Trump. The debate is taking place inside CNN studios. There will be no studio audience. So the candidates tonight will have 2 minutes to answer questions and 1 minute for responses and rebuttals. At the moderator's discretion, they could add an additional minute for clarifications or for follow-ups. Reporting live in Atlanta, Julia Benbrook, Channel 4, the local station.
And Julie, before you go, so both Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden, they went about preparing pretty differently here. How did they prepare?
So Biden has spent basically the last week at Camp David surrounded by trusted advisors. They've been having policy discussions and mock debates. Trump has really shunned this idea of traditional debate prep. He has been participating in some informal briefing sessions, but he's also kept his campaign schedule going with interviews and with rallies. Now, the prep side of things is not just about policy, it's also about presentation. And on Biden's side of things, people are going to be looking to see if he has energy. They're constantly talking about his age. For Trump, you saw in that package the back and forth and the interrupting that happened in 2020. His advisors are really encouraging him to stray away from airing his grievances and instead really focus in on the issues.
All right, Julia Benbrook in Atlanta. Thank you, Julia.
News for Jax reporter Ashley Harding joining us now in Jacksonville's 5 Points area where the Duval Democrats are holding a watch party. Ashley?
Hey, Joy. It hasn't started quite yet. It's still very much in the setting up process. We're here in Alewife. That's right there in 5 Points. We're just going to briefly show you what's going on here. You see that we have a projector screen right here for when that all begins. And I'm told that 100 people or so have RSVP'd. So there's a couple of people here, some more trickling in right now. I'm being told that they're expecting way more coming in the next few minutes or so leading up to the start of the debate. And also the chairman of the Duval Dems arrived here about 20 minutes ago. So you hear the music behind me. You see people coming in here. You see people wearing T-shirts that say Biden, Harris. And Chris, if you could just follow me just so we can look and see what people are doing. They've got buttons here, campaign buttons, and also lots of red, white, and blue. And more people are starting to arrive in. And there's really an energy of excitement here. So they're getting ready for this all to begin. You see that the TV is on. We know that the debate is going to start soon. And of course, we're going to be here for it with the Duval Dems as they watch. Joy and Kent, back to you.
Ashley, you're going to have to get him to change that channel to Channel 4. All right, we're going to check in now with News for Jax reporter Khalil Maycock. He is live at the Duval GOP watch party. That's in the St. Nicholas neighborhood. Khalil, what channel do they have on?
You know, Joy, right now people are still coming in, and I want to show you, they just sat down a few minutes ago. They were saying a prayer, and they just finished the Pledge of Allegiance. There are dozens of people right here right now, and they say they do expect more to come in here. You can see right now there is someone with the Duval GOP watch party. He is speaking on the mic, and I spoke with him earlier, and he says when he wants people to come here, he wants them to know that this is going to be a hopeful night. I also spoke with some other people who say they want to make sure that people at home know the importance of what President Trump, well, former President Trump rather, is going to say, and they hope they take in everything he says. But we'll be here for the rest of the night and bringing you those updates. But for now, reporting live, Khalil Maycock, back to you.
Thank you, Khalil. So the president and former president locked in a pretty competitive matchup here. This is similar to the 2020 election.
And the debate comes just before the candidates are set to be named as their party's official nominee this summer's conventions. Rick Mullaney, we're going to start with you. So earlier this year, Mr. Trump decided not to participate in the Republican primary debates. You remember he would hold his own appearances around the same time. But each candidate who did debate, they ended up dropping out of the race. So looking at tonight's debate, is it even necessary? And will it have a significant impact on voters when they head to the polls?
Well, let me give you the short answer. Yes, it's necessary and it's important. And I wouldn't confuse the Republican primary, which was non-competitive, versus this presidential election, which is very competitive for Joe Biden and for Donald Trump. And it is historic. When I say historic, we've never seen anything like it. For the first time in our lifetimes, you have a former president on television debating the incumbent president. First time, really, more than a century. That's only happened twice in American history that you've even had a former president against an incumbent president. But in our lifetimes, it's the first time we've seen it. What does that mean? It means that each of them has served as president. And they each have the opportunity to make the case about their term. They also have to make the case against their opponent's term and try to question what happened in that term. These are the two oldest candidates. This is the earliest we've had in history by far. The earliest before now was September. All that adds up, Joy, to something, your second part of your question, is it significant? Yes, potentially very significant. Now, there's still 4 months left after tonight, so there's time to recover. But for the American people, I think one big question on Joe Biden is, does he have the mental and physical fitness to serve for the next 4 years? I expect him to be energetic, much like the State of the Union. I expect him to be prepared. For Donald Trump, the question is, does he have the temperament to serve as president, the temperament and the demeanor? I expect you'll see a little bit of a different Donald Trump. If he's looking backwards to the past and if it's grievance, he's losing. If he's looking forward, I think it's helpful to him. And I think he wants to make it a referendum on the Biden presidency and talk about inflation, immigration, gas prices. So look for two different approaches, those basic questions, but high stakes and important debate.
And one of the things that we were just talking about, all three of these experts here have experience in coaching, helping candidates get ready for debates. Chris, weigh into that. One of those concerns going into this debate, people are talking about the age of President Biden at 81, the oldest person to sit in the Oval Office. How is that addressed tonight in the positive or negative by these candidates?
Well, of course, we have two candidates here who are older than we've seen in the past. One, in the case of Joe Biden, as you say, he'll be 82 when he starts a second term. Donald Trump, 78. But a lot of this attention has been focused on President Biden. And you look over the scope of history. Joe Biden was first elected to office in 1970, 55 years ago. This debate, I think, arguably is the most important moment in the 55 years of his political career for a couple of reasons. One, his approval ratings have been relatively frozen for the last couple of years, has had challenges sort of raising those. And second, right now, former President Trump has a small but persistent lead both nationally and in a number of these swing states. So addressing that issue of age and ability to serve, putting any concerns to rest is vital. So I think the president has a couple of different strategic imperatives tonight. One is, as Rick sort of suggested, he's got to channel that March State of the Union address where he was energetic, feisty, contentious at times, going back and forth with the Republican House of Representatives. And the second thing is he's got to frame the choice of the election. Every election is a choice. As Joe Biden said in 2020, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. That's exactly what he has to accomplish tonight. Give those undecided voters, or voters who don't want either of these candidates, which is a lot of them, a clear choice between the two of them. And the third thing is provide a compelling answer to the issue of inflation, the persistent economic issue that historically has ended presidencies. Gerald Ford lost his bid for a full term due to inflation. Jimmy Carter lost his bid for a second term, largely due to inflation. Having a compelling answer to that tonight and showing a clear plan to continue some of the price lowering we've begun to see this summer is going to be vital for President Biden this evening.
John Newman, we want to ask you, what about former President Trump? So he hasn't debated anyone since 2020, the 2020 election. At that time, both candidates, they really disregarded the whole format, interrupting each other. New rules have been established, which we'll dive into later. But if you're advising Mr. Trump, do you tell him to come in with guns blazing, or do you tell him to throttle back a little bit?
I think that there has to be a change in his demeanor because it was pretty much agreed upon the experts in the aftermath of the debates in the past that he lost the debates because of his demeanor. So I think he's going to come out against type to portray to that sliver that's persuadable, who don't have an interest, nor do they care about the bombast and about all the accusatory things that he does and all the just below the belt things that he will do. They want to hear substance. They want to hear policy. I'm not sure he's going to be able to do that for 90 minutes, but that's what they want. They do not want to hear anything that's going to be in the typical Trump motif. They want something different, and they're going to be looking for that. I think sorely disappointed if they don't see a difference.
Well, Mr. Trump even referenced that over the weekend at one of the rallies he was holding. He was asking the audience, should I come out like you just suggested, or should I give him the business?
Yeah. As our pre-show coverage of the CNN presidential debate continues, we are taking a closer look at where the candidates have been campaigning and also breaking down some of their focus points. All that after the break.
And welcome back to our pre-show coverage of the CNN presidential debate tonight. You're taking a look at our countdown clock, which shows 42 minutes left before we get to that debate getting underway. Former President Donald Trump has been hot on the campaign trail this month.
President Biden has had a busy schedule, specifically dealing with foreign matters. He spent several days, you remember, in Italy for the G7 summit, but he has made a few stops on the campaign trail. So take a look at this map. It shows the states where Mr. Biden has visited this month, highlighted in blue. The stops include McLean, Virginia, Los Angeles, California, Greenwich, Connecticut, and the states highlighted in red shows where Mr. Trump has made stops this month. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Racine, Wisconsin, Detroit, Michigan, Las Vegas, Nevada.
Yeah, Mr. Trump's campaign stop in Philadelphia was over the weekend as he held a rally at Temple University. Trump narrowly won Pennsylvania in 2016, but Joe Biden won that state in 2020. This is what the former president told his supporters Saturday.
You know, if we win Pennsylvania, we win the presidency. And all I can tell you is you'll be happy. You'll have a great economy. You'll have low energy costs. You'll be drilling. You'll get all the way back. You're going to be at levels that you've never seen before, just like you were.
President Biden, on the other hand, has spent the past week at Camp David preparing for tonight's debate. Vice President Kamala Harris made campaign stops in Maryland and Arizona, has been putting an emphasis on abortion rights. That's because Monday marked 2 years since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade.
Trump has not denied, much less shown remorse for his actions. Instead, he, quote, proudly takes credit for overturning Roe. My fellow Americans, in a court of law, that would be called an admission.
There have been key focus points for both campaigns that'll likely be in the spotlight during tonight's debate. One of the biggest talkers is the current state of the economy. The candidates, they've also been outspoken about gun regulation and, as we mentioned, abortion rights, foreign policy as well, immigration, and education. Now, the Biden-Harris campaign has put student loan forgiveness at the forefront of its campaign, canceling loans for nearly 5 million Americans through pre-existing programs. On abortion, Mr. Biden has repeatedly said that if he were reelected, he would reverse Trump-era actions on abortion rights and would establish Roe v. Wade protections. Now, on immigration, the president issued a proclamation this month that would bar migrants who cross the southern border illegally from receiving asylum. He's also announced new actions to more quickly resolve immigration cases and strengthen the screening process. On education, Mr. Trump has heavily criticized the Education Department, saying if he were elected, he would send all education-based work and needs back to the states. He also said that he would cut funding for schools that teach critical race theory and gender ideology. On abortion, Mr. Trump has said individual states should legislate reproductive rights instead of having a federal ban. And on immigration, Mr. Trump has said he would restore the COVID-19 era Title 42 policy that allowed border officials to quickly expel people who illegally crossed the border back to Mexico.
When it comes to the economy, both candidates have laid out their plans. Mr. Trump says that he would seek to extend his 2017 tax cuts, impose tariffs on all U.S. imports, and end much of President Biden's clean energy initiatives. Mr. Biden said that he would also extend some of the Trump tax cuts, but not for wealthy corporations and individuals. He would also put more tariffs on Chinese imports and push social service programs that make child care more affordable. So let's bring back our roundtable of political analysts, and we're going to call them experts now. The president obviously has a lot of things on his plate and hadn't made very many stops on the campaign trail lately. But as we mentioned, the vice president, Kamala Harris, has spearheaded many of those events. Chris, why don't you start here? Do you think that not having the same time to speak to voters like he did in 2020 may hurt the president's reelection campaign?
Well, first of all, remember in 2020, of course, we were in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, so I think campaigning was curtailed across the board. But the model you're describing, Kent, where the president sort of focuses on governing, used to be called the Rose Garden strategy, and sends the vice president out to campaigning, that's very traditional for a president seeking a second term. It was somewhat turned on its head 4 years ago when Donald Trump was running for re-election, because his preferred method is to do these big rallies going forward. I suspect what you will see is as we get into the summer, into the fall, President Biden moving more and more into campaign mode, continuing to sort of do his job in an effort to get a contract extension for another 4 years, but also beginning to pivot to the campaign and joining the vice president on the trail. That's a very traditional model for a president seeking re-election.
All right, we're going to turn to John Newman. Let's talk about the black vote. In 2020, African-American voters overwhelmingly backed President Biden. So according to the Pew Research Center, though, former President Trump only garnered 8% of the black vote in that election. However, Mr. Trump's campaign has really focused on gaining the support of black voters and other communities of color. Do you think we could see some of a shift from those voters in the upcoming election here?
Well, I think there may be more of a perception as opposed to reality. There is, because whenever they do something along the lines of reaching out to, from the GOP, reaching out for going across the racial divide into the African-American community, the media picks it up as a major story. And it becomes such a story that that gets more coverage than even a mass shooting right now, because it's new and it's exciting. But at the end of the day, I don't, and I've talked to quite a few of my friends in different parts of the country, and they don't really see a major shift. And when it comes to the difference between the turnout of the African-American female vote and the African-American male vote, it's not even a fair fight. And President Biden is not going to lose the black female vote, and Donald Trump's not going to get a huge amount of the African-American male vote.
Rick, as we look at who is voting these days, and you're at the Public Policy Institute there at JU, you're with those young going to be soon voters or people who maybe are voting in the presidential election for the first time. What is some of this? Chris and I were talking about this as well. There are some people, and they're on the older side, not the younger side, but who say, I can't stand either of these candidates. What am I going to do? What can those voters, listeners tonight, what can they get out of a debate like this evening?
Well, earlier I mentioned that tonight's debate for Joe Biden, with those older voters and those voters in the swing states, whether it's the Great Blue Wall in the Midwest, whether it's Arizona and Nevada, whether it's Georgia and North Carolina, with Joe Biden tonight, they're looking for, as Chris mentioned earlier, maybe a model on the State of the Union address. They want to know, does he have the mental and the physical fitness to serve as president? And after 7 days at Camp David and the preparation style, I expect him to be energetic. I expect him to be scripted, even though there's not a teleprompter. I expect him to go on offense. And I think those voters want the reassurance that he's up to the job for the next 4 years. For Donald Trump, it's a little bit different. They're looking for, and he needs to be disciplined. They're looking for, does he have the temperament? Does he have the character? And I believe he needs to be forward-looking. For Donald Trump, and in these debates, often it's about defining your opponent and defining yourself. I think he wants this to be a referendum on the Biden presidency and his policies, particularly inflation. He's going to talk about a 20% increase in prices over the 3.5 years of the Biden administration. He's going to talk about an increase in interest rates, housing costs and why people can't afford houses, senior citizens who are delaying their retirement because of inflation, younger people who can't make ends meet. So I think whether you're older or younger, that inflation is front and center. Chris alluded to it earlier, and I think Donald Trump's going to drive that home. On immigration, Donald, it's a rising issue, really important for the American people, and it was not 4 years ago as it is today. You've seen an explosion in that problem, a crisis over the last 4 years. Joe Biden is going to argue there was a bipartisan solution that Donald Trump was opposed to, but Donald Trump is going to argue he left it in a good place, and you've seen this explosion. You're also going to hear about gas prices and the withdrawal from Afghanistan. So Kent, whether you're young or old, I think each of them, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, have some major questions regarding each. But in the end, I think those listeners are going to ask this question: which president is going to do the most for me? And for some, that may be an economic issue. For some, it may be abortion, and I expect Joe Biden to talk a great deal about abortion tonight. For some, it may be about immigration. And for some, unlike past debates, it may be foreign policy and what we're doing in the Middle East with Israel and Hamas and what we're doing with Ukraine.
Yeah, all of those things. Another concern that we know is weighing on voters is the criminal conviction of former President Trump. This presidential debate comes just a few weeks before Mr. Trump is going to be sentenced in Manhattan. So in May, a jury found Trump guilty on all 34 counts of falsifying business records in an attempt to conceal a 2016 hush money payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. Throughout that trial, the defense argued that the payments he made to his former attorney, Michael Cohen, were for work as Trump's attorney, not reimbursements for the Daniels payment. Trump's conviction, though, carries a maximum sentence, 4 years under New York law. Most legal observers, though, expect that Mr. Trump will have little or no time behind bars, would probably be put on probation instead. Similar to that, or at least on the sidelines here, parallel to that, President Joe Biden's been dealing with legal issues, not of his own, though. His son, Hunter Biden, was found guilty of 3 felony charges in his Delaware gun trial. A jury found that he lied to a licensed gun dealer on his application to obtain a firearm while he was an active drug user. The verdict marked the first criminal conviction of a sitting U.S. president's child. President Biden has said that he does not intend to pardon his son. Like Mr. Trump, it's unclear if Hunter Biden will be sentenced to prison. He has also been charged with tax evasion in California that, if convicted, would carry a sentence of up to 17 years. But this is a big issue. This is something that both sides are weighing, and I think voters are trying to lean into and weigh in on as well.
Wondering, does this come down to the issues, or is it more of who can bust up this perception of who's got these baggage and luggage and legal things going on? You know, are people more focused on who can debate that?
I don't think that. I mean, at the end of the day, I think people realize, and you've heard it on both sides, if Donald Trump's last name was Donald Johnson, he wouldn't have been tried. Others saying if Hunter's last name was Stevens, he wouldn't have been tried. So there's a lot of perception of the politicization going on, this new term called lawfare that's going around. And so I think what it comes down to is, at the end of the day, a lot of this is baked in. There are people who believed from the very beginning that there was something going on with Hunter, not sure what it was. People believe from the very beginning something going on with Trump, not sure how that goes from a misdemeanor to a felony and how they juxtapose the laws to do that. So there's a lot of skepticism on both sides. But at the end of the day, this election, people basically care about what are these persons going to do for me.
So you don't think that people care about either of those issues? They're kind of nulling both of them, saying, okay, you got a check mark, you got a check mark, let's move on.
I think it's peripheral noise.
I think certain voters care about it, just to be very clear, that those very important independent voters, you've got polls that say 2 in 10 independent voters say they are less likely to vote for former President Trump because of his conviction. Those voters Kent just alluded to, the so-called double haters who don't want either of these candidates to be president, their votes are very affected. So I actually expect President Biden to mention tonight President Trump's convictions and his upcoming sentencing in July frequently, because that very small slice of the electorate that could decide this contest does seem to care about that issue.
Rick Mullaney, former prosecutor, is it going to go both ways? Is the former President Trump going to attack the president because of his son's legal trouble?
I think those two are entirely different. Those are apples and oranges. If I'm President Trump, I'm going to define this prosecution against him as politically motivated, as the weaponization of the criminal justice system, and a prosecutor who ran on trying to get him, and using a statute that's never been used before to go after him. And I think he can be pretty compelling, because many people agree that if his name wasn't Donald Trump, it never would have been brought. If he's smart, however, I think he then pivots to those policy issues I was talking about earlier. But Chris is right. It does matter to that sliver of people, those undecideds, but it also has done more to unite the Republican Party than you've seen in a while. while. Many have asked, how do those Haley voters come home? Some of those Haley voters came home because of this conviction. How do you raise over $200 million or $300 million in such a short time? It's because of how the Republican Party got united. That case, I expect, will be mentioned, but Donald Trump should be ready for it. Hunter Biden is really very different. It was a gun charge. It was a drug charge. The Republicans argued that the big charges, the statute of limitations has run on the tax evasion charges, although he has a smaller one set for September. And what they claim is corruption with China and Ukraine has never been charged. So there's two sides to this. I do agree with Chris. I expect Joe Biden to be aggressive. Donald Trump needs to be disciplined, and by disciplined, he should define and discredit, and he should pivot to policy issues.
But this is...
I don't want to cut you off, but we did some of that research, and CBS News poll found 55% of adults said Trump's criminal conviction wasn't going to be a factor in their vote, and only 17% said it was a minor factor.
It's very interesting, though, something that you said that you expect President Biden to focus or mention often. Does he do that carefully because he doesn't want to seem as though there's any kind of political interference in those cases?
Well, Joe, I think it's all about what I mentioned earlier, defining that choice. This is the first time in American history that a convicted felon is going to be the nominee of a major political party. Again, whether or not the electorate as a whole cares about that, it's a big deal for voters who could be the swing voters, the decisive voters who change the election, whether that's the independent or no party affiliation voters, whether it's those so-called double hater voters who don't like either candidate. So I do think the president's going to raise it as part of framing that choice. The former president is now a convicted felon who's going to be sentenced in July. He is not. I think it's a way to help President Biden mitigate some of those other issues like the age issue, like the inflation issue. So he'll use it, I suspect, tonight as a way of drawing a contrast between himself and his predecessor.
All right, so several rules have been put in place by CNN for tonight's debate. We're going to tell you what they are when our pre-show coverage continues. That's after a short break.
Welcome back. CNN has laid out several rules for this debate in an effort to prevent a repeat of the 2020 debate and what happened earlier this year in the Republican primary debates.
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, that there are going to be 2 commercial breaks during the program, and during those, campaign staff are not going to be allowed to talk with their candidates. And unlike previous debates, there will be no opening statements in this one as well. Instead, Mr. Biden, Ms. Trump, they're going to have a 2-minute closing statement. That'll happen at the end of the debate. Each candidate has 2 minutes to respond to questions. Then there's 1 minute for rebuttals, and responses to rebuttals are 1 minute as well, along with additional time at the moderator's discretion. Mr. Biden, Mr. Trump's positions on stage, those were determined by a coin toss. Microphones, those will be muted except when it's the candidate's turn to speak. Each candidate's going to be allowed to have a pen, a notepad, a bottle of water, but no props, no written notes are allowed. And also, unlike previous debates, no live audience. Again, this is an effort to try and minimize some of this disruptions.
All right, so Rick, with no live audience, microphones muted, do you think the debate will be less chaotic? We've already established that no doubt Mr. Trump is going to kind of tone it down a little. We expect that. But do you still expect some chaos and if so, whose advantage is that?
I do still expect some chaos and potentially less so, but let's talk about those 2 changes. The request to turn off the microphones, for example, so that when Joe Biden is speaking, Donald Trump's mic is off. When Donald Trump is speaking, Joe Biden's microphone is off. This was requested by the Biden campaign, but I actually think it's a two-edged sword. And by that I mean the conventional wisdom is this helps Joe Biden, and I think it does because he won't be interrupted and he can speak without interruption, and I think he's going to be well prepared. But it also may help Donald Trump against his worst instincts, which is to be always interrupting. In the first debate 4 years ago, that debate went for Joe Biden, in large part because of the performance of Donald Trump. He interrupted, he was disruptive, and it was not a good performance for Donald Trump. So the cutting off of the microphones could be a two-edged sword. And with the audiences, again, having no audience there, this also was requested by the Biden campaign. That will also prevent sort of the interruptions that could potentially happen. But again, it's a little bit of a two-edged sword. Joe Biden does a good job of delivering a line to a crowd. Donald Trump plays to a crowd but gets a little bit emotional and going. It may help keep him calmer. For Donald Trump, I think he needs to stay calm. He needs to try to be presidential. He needs to be disciplined. For Joe Biden, he needs to be energetic. He needs to be in command. I think he needs to be in offense. So as you look at these rule changes, I think they're good changes. In the long run, with this microphone, I've been a long-time advocate of cutting off the microphone, for example, when you go too long or when you're interrupting. We'll see how it goes tonight. They can tweak this over time. I think this is the first presidential debate since Kennedy-Nixon in which you haven't had an audience, so that is a big change. The microphones is a big change. There's 2 commercial breaks. That's a change. Overall, it does lend itself, hopefully, to an improved debate for the public. If you look back at the 5 debates in the Republican primary, they were difficult to watch, talking over each other, and they were brawls. Yeah. Hopefully tonight, it'll be better than that.
So let me weigh in as a seasoned debate moderator myself. Boy, you almost hope for that. Gosh, I wish that mic would be muted so that candidate has the chance to actually respond to the question so I can get the information that we're actually asking about. So in some sense, for viewers, maybe that helps. Maybe it helps to just get that 2-minute or that 1-minute response and actually understand what the candidates are saying without having to talk over each other, that kind of thing. You know, one of the things, Chris, I'll ask you, since you've helped prepare people for debates as well, what's the role of the moderators here? It's 2 moderators, and in some ways they're attacked from either side about, well, they're going to tilt it in favor of one candidate or the other. As a moderator, I know that that's never my role. My role is just to help the candidates speak.
Well, in my experience in working with moderators, present company included, Kent, is there's a lot of preparation that goes into figuring out what questions to ask, making sure that they kind of maintain the cadence of the debate, letting the candidates talk, but also holding them accountable and making sure the debate moves forward. That sometimes clashes with what the candidates' priorities are in the debate, as you know well, where the candidates for every time they get 2 minutes to answer or 1 minute to rebut or respond, their calculus is very different. They're trying to get their message out, put it back on their opponent. That does not always coincide with the way the moderators are trying to govern the debate. But this is very interesting. You know, we've gone from having sort of a panel of journalistic questioners to a single moderator format to now this 2 moderator format. So it'll be very interesting to watch how Dana Bash and Jake Tapper work together to kind of help hold the candidates accountable and try to get answers to their questions.
So John Newman, this is interesting. Candidates don't have any written notes. I mean, look, notes.
Right.
But they don't get that. They get a pen, they get a pad to write on, and water, and that's it. So is this a factor at all for them?
I'm not so sure. I think one of the things we haven't touched on, I think is extremely important, is the visualization of the debate. We don't know how CNN is going to split the screen between Trump and President Biden. What's going to happen when President Biden is speaking is Trump, though he cannot be heard on screen, is he going to be able to get into the president's ear by being disruptive? And even if he doesn't, is he going to portray in his nonverbals or in body language that he's exasperated, upset, rolling his eyes, or whatever the case may be, which will remind that sliver of persuadable voters, this is why we don't like this guy. So that would be a tremendous risk for him to do that, because we don't know how those split screens are going to be portrayed.
And we know body language says a lot.
Huge.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, we want to check back in now with News4Jax reporters Ashley Harding and Khalil Maycock. They are attending debate watch parties in our area. Khalil is at the Duval GOP watch party in the St. Nicholas neighborhood. Khalil, how are people feeling there?
Joy, there are a lot of people here. I can't give you an exact number because I lost count at 50, but there's dozens here. And I want to let you know that I'm joined now by some people from this watch party. I'm joined by Shamaria Lewis, the Coalition of Black Republican Americans. Did I get that correct? All right. And then I'm joined by Brandon Lugwood, who is the state chairman for the Young Republicans of Florida. And I know, Shamara, you were telling me that here in Jacksonville, you have been helping to get the black vote up for the Republican Party. Talk to me about why that's going to be important with former President Trump and just how that's going to help him out.
Sure. It's very vital for President Trump, because that margin is a deciding margin. And President Trump, in his administration, he was very outgoing in terms of his outreach to the black community. What we've been doing over the past few years is continuously engaging in the community. We've been continuously giving and advocating on behalf of the African American community in Duval County. That's vital, because what you'll hear from the African American community so much of the time over all the years has been politicians only come around when they need something. That hasn't been the case in Duval County, especially not with the Republican Party. We are on the ground and we are engaged.
And then, Brandon, I want to ask you, I know, former President Trump is trying to reach out to more young voters, and that's something that Young Republicans of Florida is actively trying to do. Talk to me about what you all are doing to get more people involved in the party.
Sure. Well, I think one of the things you have to do is you have to make politics relatable to the average person, right? You've got to find ways to bring folks who may not necessarily always be interested in the process into the process. And so for us, we find the issues that are really mattering to the everyday young people right now. And I'm going to tell you, the most pressing issue we consistently hear on the campaign trail is inflation. If you're a young person, there's a statistic that recently came out that 4 years ago it cost $59,000 to live comfortably, according to Zillow. That number today is over $100,000. And if you're a young person like I am, I'm 24 years old, the rising cost of living, whether it's inflation on your food, groceries, housing, it's becoming unaffordable for the average person. And so that's one of the big issues that we're really capitalizing, and you're seeing that in the polls.
Gotcha. All right, you just heard from Brandon and Shamari. Those are some of the issues that they hope are discussed here at the Duval GOP Watch Party that the president and the former president discussed. But Joy Kent, back to you.
All right, Khalil, thank you. Checking now with News4JAX's Ashley Harding, who's live in 5 Points for the Duval Dems Watch Party. Ashley.
Hey, Joy. Yes. So in the last few minutes, things have really started to ramp up here. There's more people coming in. And actually, we do have the Duval Dems chairman, Daniel Henry, joining us now. So talk to us about the turnout. It's grown a lot in the last half hour.
Yeah, I think we were always going to be expecting people to start to show up closer to the debate time. So we're excited to provide a venue for people to be able to come and watch the debate tonight. And it should be a really good one.
And we know that a lot of issues are going to be brought up tonight at the debate. The economy, inflation, immigration. As the chairman, what are some of the concerns mostly that you're hearing from people that they want to see addressed with whoever is president?
I think everyone, regardless of your party affiliation, is really looking forward to issues that deal with the kitchen table. So the cost of everyday living, the cost of groceries, the policies that both candidates are going to be able to bring to make people's lives just a little bit easier. I think that's where a lot of the audience is really going to be paying attention to. And I think President Biden is really going to be able to show not only the audience that's watching, but frankly the world, why he is the best candidate to be able to win re-election, obviously. But what he's going to be doing to deliver for not only Floridians, but people here on the First Coast.
We have about a minute left, but I feel like age is such a topic here with young voters, especially. How to reach the young voters? What are you hearing from them, and what do you think needs to be done to appease the young voters?
I think what's really important when it comes to young voters is issues and how you make their lives better. We are the generation that is still dealing with being able to afford a house, being able to deal with college loan debt, being able to afford insurance. The Biden administration has spent millions and billions of dollars to be able to invest in those issues to bring some relief to young voters. And I think he has policies to be able to show and deliver that he wants to be able to not only get young voters to vote for him, but also for young voters to be able to thrive.
Daniel Henry with us. Thank you so much for joining us. And you can see that the watch party is really starting to pick up here. We know the debate is going to start soon, and we are going to be here for it, talking to lots of people. Joy and Kent, back to you.
All right, thank you, Ashley. And still ahead on our pre-show coverage of the CNN presidential debate, we're talking about what this upcoming election means for young voters. 2 students from the University of North Florida will join us right after this break. Now, lots of people are going to be watching the debate tonight. As a matter of fact, Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement estimates 41 million members of Generation Z, those are ages ranging between 18 and 27, are eligible to vote in this year's election.
Yes, here with us now are 2 Gen Zers, both from the University of North Florida, to talk about the needs and concerns of our youngest voters. So you may recognize Bethany Luke-Tama. She's on the end there. She's joined us before. She's a registered Democrat and senior at UNF. She's double majoring in political science and English. very active in the community. In fact, she changed her address from Fort Lauderdale to Jacksonville so she could vote locally and help educate other young people about their community politics. And that includes working on an initiative to restore early voting and an early voting site to UNF. So, Bethany, topics in this presidential election that interest you the most, and we know that you have a personal connection to some of them.
Right. And I think, like, for me, this debate, I'll be going in and I'll be focused on the topics, like the big issue topics for me, which is going to be like cost of living, inflation, foreign policy, and immigration. So I'm going in with open ears, and I'm excited to hear what both of the candidates will be speaking about the debate. So, yeah, I'm prepared to be well informed after this debate.
Thank you, Bethany. Great to have you back. Also with us is Amelia Shepard, a registered Republican senior at UNF, even though she's only 19 because she graduated from high school with that associate's degree, a double major in political science and philosophy. Amelia volunteering with Jacksonville Area Legal Aid for experience toward a future law degree. This is amazing. Tell us what, Amelia, you are looking for. What are those topics that you really want to hear about tonight?
Right, so the topics that Bethany and I are concerned about are actually very similar. So the economy, immigration, and my personal relationship with the immigration issue more to me is with the crime and the drugs that are happening in America as a result of it. And crime and drugs in America are a big issue for me personally. So that's what I'm going to be looking for the former president and the current president to be speaking about, yeah.
Yeah, and we know, and I think it's okay to mention your past.
Yeah, absolutely.
You lost both parents to drugs, one fentanyl and the other from IV use. Not to say that what's happening at the border is the result of that,
right,
but that is something you'll be paying attention to.
Right, exactly, for sure.
So talk to us a little bit about, we know both of you have already decided who you're going to be voting for. You're voting for Donald Trump, you're voting for Joe Biden. So what are you listening for tonight then? Why do you care about this election if you've made up your minds?
Well, I think it's important for not just us as registered Republicans and Democrats to watch this debate, but for the people who are moderates, for the people who are in the middle, for the people who are undecided. I think it's especially important that we watch this debate to make sure that we're informing ourselves of the policies that these candidates are championing. And it's important because it has very real effects and it will affect every person, every constituent. So I think it's important that we all just sit back and watch this debate. Even though I'm set on who I will be voting for, it's still important, and I think it's just important for everyone else.
What do you think on that same topic, Amelia?
Yeah, so as a Republican voter and someone who is already decided I'm voting for Donald Trump, I think that he's really going to need to emphasize the horrible job that Joe Biden has done as President of the United States. And if it becomes a spiteful discussion about Donald Trump's irritable and excitable rhetoric, then I think he's going to lose this debate. But as far as pulling voters from the moderates, I think that Joe Biden needs this debate more than Donald Trump does.
And let me just ask, for both of you, on campus, are other students talking about this? And does that give you an opportunity to debate the pros and cons of the candidates that you're supporting?
I think absolutely. And of course, as political science majors, we're surrounded by it all the time. But even other students on campus, I think in general, the political landscape has become so polarized that people are either wanting to get more involved or completely distancing themselves. And we definitely need to do something about that.
I think a lot of people, like Amelia was mentioning, a lot of students at UNF currently, they're growing to become more apathetic towards voting. And they're instead of actually going out and seeking this information, they're kind of just ignoring it because it's become too much. It's become a game of okay, we're playing teamsmanship. I'm on this side, so I will be this side all the way. And so I think it's important that we remember to just continue to be educated and continue to have civil discourse.
Also, when it comes to the economy, I know very important for you all. Bethany, you mentioned that, your older relatives, they have homes, the presidential candidates have homes. That's something that you hope to achieve, and you feel that they are kind of out of touch with that. Right. So will you be listening to things about the economy, inflation?
Yes, I will. I think one of the biggest things that everyone should be taking a look at this debate is going to be just thinking about the candidates and their ages, because for me, it draws a lot of conflict. It reveals to me that these people are so far removed from what my reality is as a college student and a younger adult. I think about my grandma. I think about how my grandma is nearing the age of 80 years old, and her concerns, as much as I love her, are very far removed from my top concerns. And I just think about how it can be very conflicting for younger people, younger voters, especially knowing that younger voters aren't as active and they don't have the habit of voting to get interested in voting. So
just in the last couple of seconds, what's your thought on that age
I would
issue,
agree with
right?
her, more so about just the gap between the middle class and the wealthy people in America. I think there's something that needs to be done about that, and what I'm looking for in Donald Trump is the years pre-COVID, the economy that we saw pre-COVID with a thriving middle class, and that's what I'm looking for.
So we are excited about this. We're going to talk to you after the debate as well, but we'll be back in just a few moments. Former President Donald Trump hasn't said yet who his running mate for 2024 will be, but he says he knows who it is.
As some legal experts suggest, he could make that announcement during tonight's debate. These are the names that Mr. Trump's campaign is reportedly considering: North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, former Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, Florida Representative Byron Donalds, Florida Senator Marco Rubio, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, New York Representative Elise Stefanik, and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Now, as we wrap things up, we want to remind you, we are streaming the debate simulcast with CNN right here on Channel 4 starting at 9 p.m. And don't change the channel, because we'll be back here to give you post-debate analysis on the 10 o'clock news.
We're looking forward to it. And thank you so much for watching our pre-show coverage of the CNN presidential debate.
We're just as excited as you to watch what happens tonight and then talk about it after. The debate is live right after this break. Stay with us.